speaker, star speaker, actually coming all the way from Czech Republic. He came actually this night in the morning at 3 o'clock, I think. He drove from Czech to Austria to give this keynote now. So very warm welcome to Ivan Buchta, Creative Director from Bohemia Interactive. So
hello.
Let's say hello with a big round of applause.
Thanks for the introduction, and also big thanks for the invitation. I have to confess one thing before I start. This is my first keynote ever. I normally jabber about some geoinformatics, about some design problems or troubles or issues. And I'm completely unused to deliver some inspiring philosophical keynotes. So instead of just picking some serious theme and talking for half an hour, I decided to bring here my personal experience and talk about one very important thing which we should not forget while making games. Whether our games are making a difference, whether we are making a difference in the world as game devs, as a people, and whether our effort is worth it. And it's a theme which is constantly nagging me. I've been always thinking about, am I doing it good? Well, you already know that my name is Ivan Buchta, that I'm Creative Director at Bohemia Interactive. I started working for the company in 2006 after working in a Flashpoint community for ages, almost 5 years. I'm responsible for Arma series. I worked for Daisy. One of our recent projects I took part in is Argo, our free experimental shooter. And for the duration of my game dev career, I was always interested in making realistic game environments, game landscapes, and I was always somehow involved in making our terrain tools. So if there are any community terrain makers here, I apologize. Besides, even before I joined Bohemia, I always wanted to make a difference. I already made 3 little differences. I'm a father of 3 kids, which is basically preventing me from doing some serious game development, but it brings some other qualities to my life. And in the process of working on games in the last 12 years, I made some really great people, and most of them are somehow associated with Bohemia Interactive and with the way we are making games. Well, Bohemia Interactive, some of you may know us. Some of you may have heard of Daisy or Operation Flashpoint or Arma, but let me give you a quick overview of what we are doing. We are independent Czech studio, which was founded in 1999 by brothers Marek and Ondřej Španěl, whom I will introduce later. Currently, we have more than 300 employees in 7 offices worldwide, including Slovakia. We are behind the titles like Operation Flashpoint, Arma, but also some civilian simulators, Take on Helicopters, Take on Mars, or recent playful Minecraft-like game Islands, which is worth some lecture. And we are also delving into different areas like mobile games, for instance. In any case, when we are making games, we are trying to make the games which we would like to play ourselves. I still feel like being part of Arma community, and I still like playing Arma for fun. There are people in the Daisy team playing Daisy. There are mobile developers being practically addicted to mobile games, fortunately some of them, including ours. Well, there's been quite a lot of great people I had a chance to meet, and today, instead of just talking about myself and my points of view, I would like to talk about them, about quite important figures which formed my path of a game developer and which are eventually responsible for me standing here in front of you talking about my past experiences. So, my story starts in 2001. It's a year when Operation Flashpoint was released, but I was completely unaware of the game because I was studying at the university. So I was drinking, I was reading some sci-fi books, playing pen and paper RPG games, and I was also interested in geoinformatics and in environmental sciences. So what I was doing was studying environment using maps, and I was also doing a lot of old maps analysis. By the way, this is Austro-Hungarian military mapping from 19th century, really cool stuff. Also, I did a lot of science in the field. It meant a lot of freezing, some more drinking, and I went through all this because I really wanted to do something important, like digging holes in the forest. I was also playing games. This is how games looked like in 2001. Can somebody recognize this game? Pardon? Red Faction. Revolutionary tunnel shooter in which you can make your own tunnels using a rocket launcher. It was the first game I played on my then new PC, and yeah, this is how the games looked like. And it was in the summer, 2001, I think August. Me and a couple of my colleagues, fellow students, were invited to excursion to a special experimental site maintained by the Czech Academy of Sciences. Basically, they were running experiment on how change of climate would influence the forest stands. Lots of serious science was done there. We were just observers. We were being explained what's going on in there. It was very inspirational, and of course, in the evening, some drinking occurred. And I remember that precise moment when one of my colleagues, who later assumed a boring but lucrative career of a waste management specialist in his father's company, told me about a game made by some small Czech studio, and it seems to be very promising, and it seems to be very revolutionary. I was like, oh yeah, Czech games, come on, I'm playing Red Faction. And then, a month later, I actually saw it on the university network, and I tried it for myself. The game's name was Operation Flashpoint, and it changed my life, in a good way, in case your parents would ask you. You know, it was a very fascinating game because it had fairly huge game worlds on which you could use the vehicles, even ride tanks in any role. You can even fly helicopters or planes over that big world. And what was most important and most striking for me, it has very little interface, and it was quite hard to play, quite challenging. One bullet was all it took the game to kill you. But you had map, and you had compass, and if you wanted to get around, you had to use your real-life navigational skills. It was something completely different, and it brought me an experience which was incomparable to anything I played before. So, this is how I felt. That was amazing. So, for the next 3 years, I was still drinking a bit, I was still studying university, and eventually finished it. But I was mostly focused on modding Operation Flashpoint. After some initial experiments with Doom 1, by the way, it was a really good lesson in the level design. I took part in the development of FDF mod, Czechoslovak People's Army mod. I also made some trains for VBS1, As Samava was, or it still is, Iraqi city, and it was the historically first very primitive use of geoinformatics on my part to create some gaming world. And then, one day, Marek Španěl, co-founder of Bohemia Interactive, called me. It wasn't exactly like that. Like my friend from Czech People's Army was working there, and it happened that at the time when I was struggling with my PhD and I was getting gradually more and more bored, my friend arranged a meeting with Marek and later with Ondřej, who's responsible for the architecture of the engine we are using for Arma. And we met, and I started working for Bohemia Interactive as environment designer. When I started working there, I soon realized that I'm not working for just a regular game development studio. We were working in the forest. Mind you, there was a building behind which actually had offices and computers and stuff, but this was part of the company area, and we spent quite a lot of time with very serious design discussions by the bonfire. And it was also the culture of the people. I was really surprised to learn that at Bohemia Interactive, when making very serious military games or topics, we weren't discussing just lethality of weapons and tactics and stuff, but also what would the civilians do? How would we tackle players which are attacking other players or which are attacking the civilians? How would we handle the medical care? So this attention to detail, this complex approach, and this understanding that war is not just a shooting, and the ambition to deliver the complete experience, it was something completely new and overwhelming in the most positive meaning of the word. So, as I said, I started working as an environment designer on Game 2, which was supposed to be the Operation Flashpoint on steroids. Bigger, better, dynamic, open world, sandbox. Every bullet in every magazine was physically simulated. Even being in the magazine, come on. It was a very ambitious project. And fortunately, after it was cancelled, some of the assets were later used in Arma 1 and Arma 2. It was released in 2009, and I can safely say that this is my game. Like, I was in charge of the design of the game, but also took part in developing the setting. And it was the great school. It was the time of my life when I was almost solely focusing on developing Arma 2, being in constant contact with these hyper-intelligent duo of Marek and Ondřej Španěl, being challenged by their views, being challenged by their ideas. And we took a lot of lessons which are propagating even to Arma 3, Daisy, and I'm sure we will stick to them in our future projects. And to make this keynote a little bit useful for you, I will stop sharing anecdotes and also start sharing some design tips, if you don't mind. So, first thing which really struck me was the scale of things. It has multiple reasons. Like, we are dealing with the real-life ranges of weapons. Try to take a Counter-Strike Go level and fight with tanks in it. It's impossible. You need a landscape, right? Then it was a part of experience, the exploration, the sense of continuity when you are fighting for a village, then climbing the hill over it to take a look at what's in front of you. But in the same time, we had to be careful about keeping the notion or hint of the big things happening all around the player, while being strictly focused only on the things which are around the player, and we needed to optimize our scenarios, our gameplay, and be really careful about the performance. Another thing which was very useful for us was just slamming our heads into a wall when it came to scenarios. In the initial phase of Arma 2's development, we tried to just do some scenarios, react to the player, script events so that player is not bored. We realized that it's not the best way to do that. So we talked a bit with Ondra, and he explained to us that his original vision was to have Battlefield which is completely independent on player. So at that time we were using finite state machines. So scenario or a group of soldiers had some states, and based on some changing conditions we were changing objectives, behaviors. But what we tried to achieve was that every single formation, every single group of soldiers have a plan. So in case you would be wandering around and spot them in the binoculars, they would act sort of normally or in some believable manner. They could be traced, or they could be engaged, and they would still react in some meaningful way. Even if they would have some losses, we had some background plans for them. So we always had plan B for the key units in the scenario, so they were able to withdraw. And it resulted in a very dynamic environment, which in fact was reacting to player much better than the scripted scenarios. So we let the player be, and we constructed an environment which was self-supporting, which was independent on what player would do. Still, player, by engaging in the right time and right spot, was able to turn the tide, to change the outcome of the scenario. And the architecture of the scenario counted with that. We just had a different state. Like, okay, instead of you lost, was you won. So naturally, branching was perfectly possible and achievable. Tied to this self-supporting scenarios is the freedom we were given to the player, including the freedom to take a rifle and shoot your soldiers. Of course, at this stage, the game would react accordingly. But so what we tried to do was not to limit player from the start, but to give him the freedom and inform him about the possible consequences. Like there were always rules of engagement somehow explained in the briefing. Like, please don't shoot civilians or you will get shot, stuff like that. Of course, environment, I mean the surrounding soldiers, etc., would react to this, so player can do the mistake just once and learn from it and correct his behavior and how he played the game. And we had many simple systems like that. They were simple on purpose, so that when they would run in the single scenario, they can interact, they can support each other, and eventually lead to much more colorful experience compared to just some super detailed system which would be just one. Also, one thing which I remember from working with Marek was that he insisted on personification of every side, faction or agent player would interact with. Obviously, in Arma 2 times we weren't too good with facial animations, but still it helped a lot. Like, instead of fighting some masses of bad Russians, we had a guy who represented the side. He was also present on the billboards all across the gaming world. The billboard said, "Vote for our nationalist, communist, blah blah party. Vote for the evil guys because this is the best you can do." So this simple part of environment was a nice introduction to what's going on there in the background, and attaching personalities to various, let's say, stances towards the story proved to be very useful. we've always invested a lot of effort into making sure that the players would realize the world, that they would accept it as something which is true. So, in case of Cherners, we were able to physically create just that little square to the top right on the map. But then we invented the whole country, the whole geography. I don't know if you are familiar with the CIA fact book. It's a geographical yearbook which summarizes various information about various countries of the world. So we created a fictional page for Cherners. It was fun, and it allowed us to answer lots of important questions. And we went as far as inventing the flag or the anthem. I won't sing it, I promise. We invented a policeman uniform, local culture, kind of people who are there, the religion. We were simply trying to map things which can somehow be presented to the player to illustrate what the game background is about, and then we went for it. Also, we always put a lot of emphasis on this what-if factor in the narrative. I remember a GDC 2016 presentation by a Hollywood scriptwriter, and one of the key points of his presentation was, hey, we always started with just one sentence describing the plot, the beginning, the conflict, and it starts with what if. So what if there is some fictional country which would be suddenly subject to United States Marines invasion, stuff like that. Also, it was kind of funny to play with the similarities to the real world, because it makes this whole fictional world much closer to the players. Also, we found out that sticking to the realistic approach to the visual, starting with environment, but continuing with uniforms, civilians, billboards, all of this, it helps us to keep the game palatable for the players in the long term. Because instead of trying to impress player after every nook and corner, we have this boring forest. Everybody knows this boring forest, but you like to walk through the boring forests, right? So, because you look into the green foliage, it's nice, relaxing. So, we realized that if we stick to the realistic approach to this, people won't mind, people are able to inhabit the environment with their own stories. And if you are using the known patterns, it's also better for their navigation in the terrain. They can better understand. If you have some sci-fi level, or right now I'm playing Sniper Elite 4, it's an interesting game, which would certainly work very differently without all the supporting graphical user interface elements. But the level design, while it's very clever in terms of delivering the gameplay they wanted, they are detaching it from the real world. It's obvious, like artificial. It's too picturesque, too dynamic, too vertical, and while it's good for the game, I probably won't be spending too much time there. I won't be replaying too much, but it's a different game. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just a different path. Also, we've always tried to educate people. I remember when playing Flashpoint, I suddenly became expert on the Cold War era military because of all the add-ons and stuff. But it's not just this. It's also like a general cultural awareness. Hey, there are some different countries which look different. Our Tanoa terrain, made according to the real-life Fiji, can be used to teach geography of Fiji, because there are so many local landmarks and so much research we did on the vegetation, on various features. traffic signs, architecture, and we abstracted it to the essence of Fiji, which could be shown to any students of Fijian language or Fijian geography. But there are also these practical things which I've mentioned, like how many of you could use a compass? That's great. Rest of you play some Arma. I remember in Flashpoint there was a scenario in which you had to determine the north using the constellations. So adding these little things to give players something new besides what they know, to just let them do more than just consume what you have for them, it's always good. All right, now we are in the year 2011. It's the year when we started developing Arma 3 for real. And it's one of the very first screenshots we made and released for public. We were struggling to put together various aspects of the game, various parts of the content which were intended. And as usual, we had troubles with the multiplayer. First, to even have some multiplayer, then to have some multiplayer scenarios. And suddenly, we got a call from a community guy from New Zealand, Dean Hall. Dean promised to make some multiplayer for Arma 3, and he really tried, and he definitely produced some interesting prototypes. But then he was renting an apartment in a very nice part of Brno, and as far as I remember, he had some really wild neighbors, so he couldn't sleep, and he was still full of his experience from the survival course he went through together with the Army of Singapore. This is not his photo, but this is just to illustrate the kind of things he was experiencing. And I remember we were discussing a survival game which would present some of the true survival problems to the player, maybe have some educative meaning in terms of letting player experience the decision-making process when you are stuck somewhere in the jungle, everything is either poisonous or wants to eat you or both. You can't eat anything without danger, there's no water, it's too hot, etc. And he came up with a DayZ mod. Now we are developing DayZ standalone, but I don't play this game that much. I have other duties, but I got addicted to DayZ mod. I played from some very early versions, and I dare say it's a very good lesson in game design. And I'm really glad I was able to witness the creative process behind that. When Dean started making it, he didn't want to make a zombie apocalypse. It was a survival game where zombies were sort of tool to guard the resources players needed to survive. You know, you had some house. In the house, you had a can of tactical bacon, for example. And it's really in there, but in DayZ standalone. And it's really tactical. Anyway, you had to be very tactical to dodge zombies, which were spawned around the buildings, guarding your food. So suddenly, you were not shooting to kill. You were not amassing score of zombies. You were saving your bullets. You were thinking, okay, this whole house looks like it's been looted. Will I kill those 2 zombies, expend 2 of my 3 precious bullets and eat? Or will I starve for a couple more hours, maybe die in the process, but try to search some safer spot? There were lots of dilemmas, lots of interactions, lots of possibilities, but everything was was based on some very simple rules and the ingenious utilization of what Arma 2 already had to offer. And for me, it was simply great to watch it, and it was great to experience how people reacted to the game. That's like, if you achieve this as a game developer, that people are reacted very emotionally to your game. They are fearing, they are struggling for their life. But then we've seen also great moments of people helping others in the game. It was a very powerful moment. Like, you know, you got guys who were just robbing new people. You spawned somewhere, you were killed by someone, robbed of your can, bullets, bandage, and that was it. And then there were people who were trying to signal you, hey, I'll save you, or I'll help you. Do you have enough water? Please meet me at this cottage. And then they killed you in the cottage sometimes. But generally speaking, DayZ was really something for me, and ever since I keep thinking about impact on the players and about the emotions I can deliver, even in the open world. And here comes Mr. Christian Ruffer. You are now looking onto the face of one of the greatest people on earth, seriously. I first met Christian when we got some strange mail from International Committee of the Red Cross. And we met in Prague in the BI Simulations offices. I was scared because, you know, our games were about killing people, artillery, tanks, gunship helicopters, white phosphorus. You name it, we had it. Community even made nukes. Come on! Red Cross. That was amazing meeting. Truly amazing meeting where I was confronted with a guy whose original career was service in the Swiss military. It's a military officer. And then he went to various African places, Afghanistan, some other dangerous places on the earth, just to help people. And this guy came with a very interesting thing. He said that he likes what we do, including the artillery and white phosphorus. Because where other games have this, for those not versed in the international humanitarian law, this is the summary execution of the prisoner of war, something which is utterly and terribly wrong. Don't get me wrong, this is from Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which is the game I loved to play. But it's just good to work with the information, with some hard data. So while others had this, we had this. We had rules of engagement. So since Flashpoint, if you hit your soldier, you became a renegade. And you were suddenly attacked by your forces. As in normal life, like if you'd be serving in the military and start shooting your teammates, they would just kill you. It's a normal, simple thing. We had these protection markings on unarmed medical vehicles. We had non-combatants as part of the battlefield. You know, all those civilians, popes, people, dogs, they were there. Sometimes they were part of the scenario. You were able to engage them and be punished. We had combatants identification. We had various other things they actually liked because it resonated or it respected the international humanitarian law. International Committee of the Red Cross is an independent humanitarian organization which is focused on mitigation of human suffering during wars. They are doing it in every possible way. And one of the ways, the way Christian Ruffer was selling to us was, you know, we don't mind killing. We will let you use all the weapons and weapon platforms, whatever. We are just asking you guys to depict the violence in the correct context. Because they feared that if games about modern military conflicts would show wrong role models, it would lead to increase of wrong things done by the soldiers on the battlefield. You know, if you are exposed to the fact that role model, the good guy, is torturing the bad guy who's unarmed, he's not dangerous anymore, he's prisoner of war, then it's more likely that when you grow up, join the army, be sent to some foreign mission, you will regard torturing people as a normal thing. We found this very valid, and we gladly accepted their offer to give us some consultations, give us some education, some explanations. And we start even improving the stuff we've had. It was the cool thing. They didn't want to punish us for using their protective markings, copyrighted symbols. They didn't want to punish us for the violence. They just want it to be done right. They want the consequences. And it also resonated with what we wanted, the authentic experience, the whole thing, not just the shooting, not just the fun part, but all parts if possible. So, the guys even arrived to our headquarters south of Prague, and we had a one-day meeting. They had lectures about international humanitarian law, and it was very inspirative. And then it was cool to see our designers actively searching and thinking and writing to Christian about what they should do or how he views the situation. So we added our little bit, of course, but not just this. We learned the value of knowledge, but we also wanted to give something back. So as we are given the consultations, we put ARMA into some good use. So, for example, what you see here in the background is the basic introduction to the please don't shoot civilians for various warring factions in Syria. Syria, I don't know if you are still following the conflict. It was a mess with like, not 2 factions, not 3 factions, 50 factions, with only a fraction of them being trained soldiers who have heard about some Geneva Convention or Hague Convention about international humanitarian law. Most of them were just ordinary people taking sides, being armed, shooting others. And what ICRC did was that they used ARMA to create some pictures or videos which would accompany their instructions. It was very useful. It was available on the internet. I believe it still is. And when we visited Geneva, we were invited to meet with the president of the organization and some of the people from Christian's department. It was a huge honor. And one of the coolest moments was when they told us, hey, you probably saved some lives. So that was truly something. And of course, besides this, some altered version of Altis appeared in one of the training program, well, not training programs, it's more like a set of lectures or examples and practical exercises for high-ranking military officials, training them in the international humanitarian law, because in reality, these things can be very ambiguous in reality. And thanks to ARMA, our PDF map of Altis and some in-game shots, instead of being issued tons of papers with just, some typed explanations of the scenarios, they were suddenly being fed by the information and intel similar to what they would get in reality. It was much closer to life. It was much more efficient. So in the long term, we probably saved some more lives. Also, in 2014, we organized Make Arma Not War contest. It was a mod-making competition with some insane amount of prize money. But besides that, we also organized a special award named Healthcare in Danger. It was precisely about that. It was to raise awareness about the very critical issue. Like in the war zones, you can stick some red crystal or red cross to yourself, but you still get shot at and you get killed. And contrary to warring militaries, your protection, even like a helmet and stuff, you have nothing. You have nothing because you should not resemble soldier. So your only equipment is this T-shirt with a red cross, and it's not bulletproof. So this was part of a huge campaign Red Cross is doing to raise awareness about this. And the winner was the guy who created the scenario where you were flying into some hot zones with your unarmed helicopter, just extracting wounded, helping people, and you were shot at. And something I'm extremely proud to present, our Loss of War DLC for Arma 3 released a few months ago. I really recommend to give it a shot. It's different from our usual Arma stuff in many ways, and it also deals with the topic of mines, unexploded ordnance, healthcare in danger, and it's fun to play. Besides being super educative and super serious, it's a very nice chunk of very unusually designed and paced gameplay. All right, the last guy, last but not least, whom I would like to talk about is Mr. Plář, Jarek Plář. Some of you may still remember Vietcong games, which he made with his company Turdon. He also took part in the development of Mafia 2 and Mafia 3. And when he joined the company 2 years ago, it was like something from another planet. Like Bohemia Interactive was always like a secluded brotherhood of people who are doing games their way. Of course, it results in many qualities, but I dare say we were overlooking just a common game dev scene, education and stuff like that. So Jarek became my mentor and started borrowing me books and sending me to the conferences. And it's his fault that I'm here, because it was last year's DevCon when I met Johanna Perker, Dr. Perker. And in the end, I was invited here. Also, one of the very valuable lessons I took from Jarek was that creative people should not be charged with executive powers. So I gave it up, and I can now afford focusing on the creative part and leaving other people in control of the production and of the important stuff which lead to releasing the game, which is the most important thing we should do. Yeah, and here I am. That's because of these people. But it's not the end yet. If I can look back, in the past 12 years, I've learned a lot, and I can safely say that some of the things we are doing were definitely great. The way we trust player, the way we put power in his hands instead of ushering him through the experiences. It's something which is very valuable, and it's not as common as it should be. Delivering consequences along with the freedom is another good practice. there's one very specific thing pertaining to mainly Arma games, but it will be also a case of DayZ soon. We let people modify our games. I wonder if Icebreakers, somewhere around here? Hey, nice to meet you, Lado. So please meet one of our lead community terrain makers since Operation Flashpoint. So again, apologies for the tools, but it's not that bad, come on. I recently started playing with Unreal. His work is possible only because of the open architecture tools and the support we are trying to give. Of course, it's only rarely perfect, but it's important that it's possible, that we let people do that. And not just on the technological front, we are also trying to tackle it legally, offer people licenses, at least as an example for their own versions, or for licensing with Creative Commons or whatever. So if you let players in, it can bring in some quality, like DayZ. There would be no DayZ without opening the game. Then there's our responsibility for the content. I remember in the first summer in the company in 2006, we were sitting by the pond and I was asking Andrzej, hey, what's preventing us from delivering like a complete civilian population, including children? Then he explained to me that it would be the same reason why he didn't want destructible churches in Operation Flashpoint. That he would regard this as crossing some line. That, okay, let's give people freedom to kill adults, to kill soldiers, etc. But we should not add kids. You know, that would be something for sick people. We should not do this. Like, we have kids, we don't want our kids to appear in the game like this, being shot. So this was their way of thinking. And when we were doing Pakistan, Operation Arrowheads, which is the DLC for Arma 2, its environment is inspired by Afghanistan. And Afghanistan consists of some brown mountains, brown villages, and occasionally there is a great landmark, some colorful mosque. And they are so typical piece of architecture that we simply could not neglect them. But we stripped them of any religious symbology, meanings, and inscriptions. We just wanted to make them neutral because we wanted to show respect to people's religion. And especially Muslims are very sensitive to it, and we have to work with it. So, yeah, it's the responsibility. And of course, it's good to be passionate about what you're doing. You really need to want to do what you're doing. And I think that in the past decade, we've shown that we are really passionate about our things, bothering, adding all the non-combat things, civilians, extra rules, working with the Red Cross. It shows the passion. So, besides the business achievements, because we've become quite successful company, I'm glad to say that we keep entertaining the people. It's important. I would like to stress that it's important to think about what you're doing in the broader scope to make your games valuable, not just as entertainment, but let's not forget that games are entertainment. So it's also important. So if you make a good game, it should entertain people, because it may be a person who just needs to unwind, get some rest with your game. We like to support creativity, and we do that. Lado is here. There are hundreds of people like him across the globe doing stuff, organizing events, being creative. We've probably educated or inspired many people to, look into something, learn something, do stuff they wouldn't do otherwise. Flashpoint made me try airsoft for the research purposes. And again, we probably saved some lives, just because we delved into things which wouldn't make sense from a purely business point of view. And if we look forward, how many of you are going to participate in the Global Game Jam? Awesome. So you guys, but also it pertains to everybody else in the room who will ever do anything with the games. Try to think about your responsibility to the society, your neighbors, to yourself. It's also important. Like, would you make some game which is against the principles by which you live? I don't think so, so be careful about that. Because when you're making a game, you're creating a media with immense potential. People would be playing it, sometimes spending years with your game. As we are lucky to boast, there are people who started playing Flashpoint and they are still playing Arma 3. There are people who've been playing games like Skyrim. Well, I spent a year playing Witcher 3. With occasional breaks. But it's important to consider that games shouldn't be just killing time. I would like to suggest to think about what added value you can add to your games, to your creations, how your players, how your customers can benefit from your game, besides just killing the time. So, Global Game Jam, with its nature and purpose, is a perfect place, maybe not to directly try to save the world, but at least to think about it and try some unusual idea. So, let's realize that games are perfect tools for providing valuable experience which you can deliver. You can deliver some meaningful narrative. In the past, in the ancient Greeks, they were playing tragedies, not just amuse themselves. You will certainly agree with me if you've ever saw a Greek tragedy, that it's not a pleasant thing to see. It's something which is bringing catharsis, a cleansing of your soul from your own sorrows, from your problems. It offers you some solution and compassion. Yeah, I was playing Firewatch at the time, which was very difficult for me personally, and it helped just because I got sort of identified with the main character for a while. It took me like 4 hours, but for me it worked. Games are also great tools for education. We are not educating these little boys on determining what kind of weapon or tank they see on the screen. This is from the event promoting maps, mapping, geography, geoinformatics systems. We've visited the North Bohemia Institute of Liberec last November, and there were plenty of school kids coming along with their geography teachers. And we were offering map to anybody who was able to navigate using just a map, just a compass. And we were surprised that some of the kids were really proficient with that, and some were learning it on the spot. And there was even a guy who, we were giving them a printed paper map of our Malden terrain for successfully finishing the task, the navigation race. And then one guy really sucked in it, and there was his friend who already won his map. I'll navigate you. So he unfolded the paper map, and while one guy was driving, the other was, turn right, turn left. You're a moron, why did you tell me to turn left? They were amazing. And then the geography teacher came, and we explained to them how things work in our game, that we have constellations. that we have geotypical terrains, we have lots of real-life features copied in there. And they were like, wow, this is what we want. And you have Compass, and they were like, wow. And last but not least, games can even help people to overcome their health problems, like curing post-traumatic stress disorder. VBS, the military simulation cousin of ARMA, has been used for this, along with multitude of other similar simulations or VR applications. But my neighbor just told me about the Czech simulator of terrible heights for people who are afraid of heights. It's agoraphobia, right? And this was used to cure them. So remember, these are the powers, these are the tools, and you have the power in your hands, especially those who will participate in the Global Game Jam. So have a great Game Jam. I realized that the common YouTube keynote to pass the Global Game Jams to 5 minutes on average. So Johanna's 15 minutes were quite generous. But I'll still spend a little time giving you some basic advices, like don't create ARMA, but Daisy is simple enough, so you may end up creating another Daisy, and I'm crossing your fingers. Obviously, you will need a lot of support, and I would be really glad if you would, be it on the Global Game Jam or in your future projects, if you think about the impact of your work, and if you would dare to make a difference. And instead of final slide, let me share what just recently appeared in my mailbox. A message from ARMA fan, a guy whom we really helped. For those who forgot their glasses, the guy suffered from PTSD after serving some time abroad in the US military, and when he got back, he basically relived some of the nasty situations, and it helped him. And I wish you to receive similar accolades in your game dev careers, because after some time you will surely realize it's more important than any kind of award. So thanks for your attention. Again, have a successful jam and have fun.